Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I am joined by a long-time collaborator, but first-time caller to the podcast, the director of the Lemur Conservation Network, Lynne Venart, to celebrate the one and only, the thing we celebrate every year here at Pangolin that I am so excited to be back celebrating again, World Lemur Day. Such a good day, such a brilliant group of animals, such a great, amazing time. We get to chat all about the most recent progress in lemur conservation, including card games, bioacoustic kind of work, reforesting, education work, new camera trapping projects. There are so many incredible, exciting, progressive and brilliant things going on across Madagascar and the rest of the world to help protect these amazing animals. And yeah, we just get to celebrate all of that today, and it's brilliant and exciting, and I can't wait for you to hear all about it. We also discuss how you can get involved in the celebrations and how you can support both the Lemur Conservation Network and their partners. So they have a new donation system, which actually means that you can make sure your money goes directly into the hands of Malagasy people, Malagasy researchers, Malagasy projects, and so it's super exciting, and it's facilitating a lot of great work, which you will hear about throughout the episode. So I'm very, very excited about that. As always, I'll put links to everything we mentioned throughout the episode in the description to make sure you can check it all out nice and easily. And yeah, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, because also the reason I'm so excited is in a few weeks, episode 100 is coming out. So lots of fun, amazing stuff going on. And just making this World Lemur Day even more exciting than I think every other one we've done so far. So just brilliant stuff going on. With all that being said, I hope you have an absolutely fantastic World Lemur Day. I hope you love hearing Lynne talk. She is brilliant. She does so much, and yeah, she just tells so many brilliant stories about so many brilliant things. So yes, I really hope you enjoy the episode. And without further ado, once again, happy World Lemur Day. You can only say it one day a year, so you've got to say it many times. And let's get started. And welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by the director of the Lemur Conservation Network, Lynne Venart, who helped to launch the whole organisation back in 2014, 10 years ago, which I don't know if that's a scary thing for you to think about, but 10 years ago. And she is here today to celebrate, of course, something we celebrate every year here on Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, the fabulous, amazing, exciting, wonderful World Lemur Day. So thank you so much for joining me today, Lynne, and happy World Lemur Day.
Thank you. Happy World Lemur Day to you. I'm excited to be here.
No, I'm so excited to have you here. So a bit of backstory for the listeners is, you might remember, it must be about 3 years ago now, we did a whole series all about lemurs and all of these amazing organizations that work in Madagascar and all of this amazing stuff. And then last year we did some, I think over the last couple of years, we've done episodes for World Lemur Day. And the unsung hero of all of that is Lynne, because she is the person who kind of found all the guests, put me in touch with all of these amazing people, and helped to kind of, set it all up. So finally getting her moment in the spotlight, and I'm so excited. I guess I've kind of bigged you up there a little bit, but aside from that, do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners? Because I always think, I know you from helping me with all this stuff, but you probably have a much more in-depth, interesting backstory that you can tell yourself. So yeah, could you tell me a little bit about, and the listeners a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And thanks so much for having us over the years, all the Lemur Conservation folks. So it's been really helpful for us. So my name is Lynne Venart, and I'm the co-founder and now the director of the Lemur Conservation Network. So just a little bit of backstory. My background is not actually in science. but in communications and digital design. So in addition to my work at the Lemur Conservation Network, I work full-time as a senior user experience designer and researcher at one of the large museums in Washington, D.C. So, you might ask, like, how do these things connect? I first became passionate about lemurs in Madagascar when I saw a documentary about shafakas about 25 years ago. I just saw them leaping across the ground to get from tree to, and then going tree to tree. And I just could not get over myself. Like, what are these animals and how do I learn more about them? So I just became fascinated by Madagascar and dreamt of visiting. And I finally visited for the first time in 2012. And then just being there in person, I knew I needed to do something to help. So after that trip, I first volunteered with a nonprofit to co-author a literature review on education in Madagascar. And that eventually led me down the path to co-found the Lemur Conservation Network in 2014. And since then, I've served as the Director of Communications for Lemur Conservation Network, and I earned my master's in conservation biology from Miami University. And that program really gave me the science background to couple with all of my years of experience working with Lemur Conservation Network. And so now I am the current director of the Lemur Conservation Network, and it's super exciting to talk to you.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I think it's something that like is really really exciting because like it proves a couple points that we always like to talk about on the show, right? There's these moments like number one is the importance of these connections with nature, whether no matter how they come, whether it be through documentaries or a zoo or going out on a walk in a park or going on a holiday somewhere and seeing something new and exciting, like these moments of connection that change the direction of your life completely is so important. It also proves the essentiality of everybody being involved in conservation, right? Because there's so many people, I think, who think, oh, well, I never did a degree in biology or I never did a degree in like science of any kind. So how can I be involved in conservation? Well, it came later down the line for you, yes, but at the beginning, that isn't what got you involved. That isn't what started. That's so exciting. And also the importance of just having this interdisciplinary exchange of things going on. It's amazing. It's really, really exciting.
And you never know what can inspire somebody. I watched nature documentaries and then I just was like struck by the shafaka and it just like never left me. So you never know how you're going to inspire someone. So it's really important to keep that going.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and like it's and hopefully like some of the stories that people will have heard on all these episodes of the podcast that we've done will be that moment of inspiration for someone. That's the dream anyway, I suppose. That's the ultimate goal. I guess then we also like before we get into it, because for listeners, the whole point of this episode, I think, is every year there's so many exciting things that go on in the world of lemur conservation. And this year, I think what we're going to do is do this kind of fun, exciting recap of all of these exciting conservation stories and breakthroughs that have been going on with Lemur Conservation Network and some of their collaborators and organizations that they work with. And before we do that, I think it's also important to set up, because we have all these episodes in the past, so if you've not heard them, go back. But some people, this could be their first episode of Pangolin, this could be their first time encountering Lemur Conservation Network. Could you tell us a little bit more about the organization as well? I know we talked about where it came from a little bit, where you founded it and things, but what does it do? What's its mission? These sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. So the first most important thing about the Lemur Conservation Network is that we believe that lemurs can be saved from extinction if we all work together. Working together and that collaboration is really the core of who we are. We grew out of a lemur action plan that was published in 2013 by the IUCN Species Survival Commission. So this lemur action plan listed all of the work that was needed to save lemurs from extinction. It was published in the journal Nature. And so with the Lemur Conservation Network, the goal was to create an online platform that shares all of this work that's in the lemur action plan and encourages people to help and support that work. So that's where we began, and we still serve that purpose. And we've grown a little bit to support those conservation organizations in more ways. And so just for some background, like Madagascar is very large. It's like 40% larger than the state of California. And so conservation is really spread out in Madagascar, especially because the roads are not great. So there's a lot of really small organizations that focus on like one or two regions and the community is in a very specific location and the lemurs that live there. So there was a need to create some unity and bring all of these conservation organizations together. So that's what the Lemur Conservation Network does. There's over 60 organizations in our network. So we work to open up communication between them and share work with with the rest of the world. And we focus on needs in conservation in Madagascar that can be solved broadly. So we're not working in like one particular village or whatever. We're sort of looking at all of Madagascar and all these organizations and what do they all need, or what do a bunch of them need that we could maybe solve. And we also work to uplift the small Malagasy-led conservation organizations and the Malagasy conservation professionals. So whether that's through networking for them or career building, we have a small grants program for Malagasy professionals. And then we also create education resources that we share with organizations and schools across Madagascar. And so that sort of helps them have something to start with. If maybe an organization doesn't focus specifically on education, but they might have a few education initiatives per year, then they can use our resources and not have to like start from scratch or not do those education programs. And then we also promote the World Lemur Festival, World Lemur Day. That's a big thing, of course, and that's why we're here today. So that's one of our big communications efforts every year is the World Lemur Festival and World Lemur Day. So it's very exciting.
Yes, yeah, because it's one of those ones that I think sometimes, conservation organizations can be quite humble and not too. They don't necessarily like they do a lot of incredible work, and sometimes they don't shout about it. It's a really good excuse to get the whole world to look at this amazing stuff that's going on, support it, like cherish it. Make sure that it happens, learn more, like share the stories with your friends. Like, yeah, it's such an important day. And I think also an important organization, right? Because like so often in conservation, we can feel like we're working alone. We're working in these little silos of this is my project and this is my thing and I'm working on it. And it can be hard, right? When these stories about kind of climate change and ecosystem like major ecosystem issues and all these threats of extinction and the red list, all this stuff goes on and it gets very kind of overwhelming. So having that network of people around you who can support you and lift you up and hear success stories from and re-inspire you, it's really good for morale, number one, and it's also good for these kind of knowledge exchanges and things. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's good to, we invite everybody to write blog posts on our website and stuff like that. And so it's like, you're right, you're doing your work in your particular region or with your species, and you are, reading the literature and learning what other people are doing, but having a platform where we can share information with each other. So if one person's doing a reforestation project in one area, to learn from that other organizations that it's doing it in another area in Madagascar and like be able to share this knowledge is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, that's the exciting thing about the podcast is that we now get to tell not just the other organizations, but also all of the listeners about your amazing work. And I guess, that leads really nicely into kind of, getting to shout about some of the exciting things that have been going on. And so, I think we kind of, in our minds, we have, for you listeners, we've broken it down into kind of two bigger sections. We have the work that the Lemur Conservation Network has been kind of doing, and then also some stories later on about some of the amazing work that its collaborators are doing. But I guess all of these things happen with each other, and like there's a lot of collaboration goes on, which I think will also become clear even when we're the lines will become blurry, I think, as we go through the discussion, but we'll see. Because it's all about that connection and partnership. And I think the first thing that I wanted to ask about, and I think is really exciting and interesting, because as somebody who is a big fan of games of all kinds, whether they be computer games or physical games or whatever they are. I was very excited when I saw the email come into my inbox about this, which is you have a lemur card game, which I think is a really interesting way of engaging people. So like, tell me about it. Like, what is it? What does it do? Who's it aimed at? Yeah, what's it for?
Yeah. So we have this lemurs card game, and we have it available in Malagasy, the local language in Madagascar, as well as English. So it's been in the works since 2021, and it was really a collaborative effort. We had a bunch of volunteers that were working on it that were from the UK, Madagascar, the USA, around the world. And we all really wanted to come up with a game or some, not, we didn't even know if it was going to be a game, but some sort of conservation education materials about lemurs that could be used by lots of different organizations across Madagascar or different schools, so that, some things do need to be like hyper localized, but what is something that we could create that would sort of be usable by everybody in Madagascar? So that was our goal. And we sort of just held a bunch of brainstorming sessions to really come up with it. And what we came up with was this card game. So it's really several games, but it's a deck of cards. So there's 94 cards, and there's species cards for 29 species. And then there's cards for different habitats, foods, nocturnal, diurnal, like different traits about the lemurs. And then there's instructions for 6 different games. And you can also make up your own games too to use with the cards. So it's things like memory, and there's a version of Top Trumps, which I know is a popular game in the UK.
Yeah.
And some other games. And then we also are building some lesson plans to use in like different more activities that aren't necessarily games, like storytelling or whatever, to use with the cards. And so for the in Malagasy, the games are available for conservation organizations and schools across Madagascar, and we've distributed to over 40 organizations and 20 schools so far. And then the English games we've given out to over 50 zoos in the USA. So the zoos are using them in their summer camp programs, and also for like if they hold a World Lemur Day activity coming up, then they can use the cards to really share the love of lemurs and education with their guests. So it's a really fun way for kids to learn. One thing about education in Madagascar and schools is that they're often more about like memorizing things, and like there isn't a lot of opportunities for young Malagasy kids to like have fun while learning. So it's like giving them something that's fun, but that they happen to be learning about lemurs while they're playing these games. That's really the goal. And it's proven really successful. Last summer, I was in Mashwala National Park in Madagascar in the Northeast, and we did 2 different activity days with the kids in the school there, and we used the card games, and we did some other like mask making activities and stuff, and it was just so much fun. The kids were so excited to have us there, and we're so excited that you could see their minds buzzing, like playing the game, but they're also having fun. So they're learning about stuff and getting curious, but also they're playing a game and it's fun. So that's really what we were after. So super, super exciting.
And I suppose the genius of that as well is that like kids can sometimes sit down and be engaged for hours, or they need something to change, right? They need like this kind of, and so by having all of these different options in the one kind of thing, it's like, oh, well, they're kind of getting done with one set of games onto another. And there's that's like the continuation of learning through different games, through different things. Like they're learning about the same thing, even if they're doing different things, even if they kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, pick it up one day and think, oh, I don't want to play this. I want to play XYZ game. Like I want to play the version of Top Trumps. Like, yeah. And even if it's a healthy, like I remember that quite well from when I was younger. I had all the kind of these similar kind of cards games, right? Of kind of like, yeah, the speed of a cheetah versus the speed of this elephant, or versus the speed of a giraffe, or versus whatever it was. That like growing up, like you wouldn't think you would take them in because it's just a game. But then you think about it, and actually, like so much knowledge sticks with you through these little interactions and things that you have. It's amazing, and like so exciting, so exciting.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
also makes it really adaptable for different ages, because that was one challenge when we were trying to think of things, was like, how do you make one set of education materials that will work for like 5-year-olds and also for like 40-year-olds? Like,
Yeah.
that's a ridiculous challenge. And, some people might not be able to read and write. And, so we were just trying to think of how can we do this. And I think having one set of cards that you can have different games, and they might be different levels of difficulty, that it really works. And also we were really focused on making something that you didn't have to read or write to use. So we have lots of illustrations and icons and things like that. So, because there's also many different dialects of Malagasy in different parts of the country. So it's like, you don't want to make it so that only people in this one region can understand, or have to have cards that have like, 18 translations of the same word or something like that. So definitely relying on visuals was really important. And I think it's also helps because they're, lemurs are cute and we have cute
Yeah.
illustrations. So
Yeah, I remember seeing the cards and thinking like they're beautiful, beautiful cards, like pictures that I've seen of them. And they also like I think that's the thing, right? Is that you're assisted in the animals that you work with because they are both unusual, intriguing, some of them very beautiful, some of them more kind of kooky, fun looking creature. Like you have this like built-in diversity that is kind of like going to be engaging for everyone, whether they be 5 or 25 or 35 or 40, all the way up. Whoever you're trying to engage, they're going to kind of look at it and go, "Oh, that's really unusual." And like yeah, that's really really exciting. And I suppose is that so that's something you've developed over the last year. So I don't know whether you'll oh, you said a couple of
yeah,
years
so
actually. Yeah.
we've developed in the last few years. And so
Yeah.
now over the last like year and a half or so, we've been
Yeah.
distributing them across Madagascar, and we're starting to reach at
Mm,
more schools now too.
yeah.
So that's really exciting.
Yeah. Have you heard any good like have you had feedback of people really engaging with it? Because I think that's where it must be the
Yeah.
most rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we first launched them, our Madagascar manager, Sehenu, she went with another Malagasy staff person to a bunch of the different sites, the different organizations, and like so we had 6 different like education days with different organizations in different parts of Madagascar, and so that was we were able to learn, how does this work? How do we need to make any changes to the instructions or anything like that? And we've definitely seen, people really enjoying using them. And then one of our partners actually went to visit one of the parks that we had, and one of the organizations that we had given the game to. And when she got there, all of the park guides were all playing the game. So that was super cool that like the adults were also super interested in it. And like it was just happenstance that they happened to be playing it. So that's a good testament, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not. That's always the nice one where you catch somebody out for being like, "Oh, you're like." I get it sometimes when it's like somebody like mentions the podcast or something unknowingly, just like, "Oh," and I happen to be. I'm like, "Oh, actually, thank you." Like, there's that thing of like, I've caught you, and maybe you don't even know that I had a hand in developing this game for like, and I've caught you like playing it. Is so like exciting. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that also like transitions nicely into something else that we wanted to talk about, right? Of like going out into these schools, doing these kind of things. I know that you kind of have a partnership with Teach for Madagascar, kind of bringing conservation education to these rural schools. And I wondered, kind of
Yes.
like, yeah, is there, aside from the game, obviously, which is working wonders, what do you want to tell us a little bit more about that partnership?
Yeah, so we started working with Teach for Madagascar in early 2024. And Susie Lewis from Conservation Fusion had actually recommended that we start working with them because they had been working with them for their dream school in Lavavulu, Madagascar. And she really loved their organization and felt like they really helped improve all their education work. So we started working with them this year. And they Teach for Madagascar is really awesome, and it's really helped us reach so many more schools than we would ever have the budget to reach on our own. Um, so they focus on primary education and the primary school teachers in rural schools. And so just some background about the schools in Madagascar, like it's over 80% of the public primary school teachers are sort of paid by these parent associations. So they're usually paid with like rice or a small amount of money, and it's really rural areas. And so the teachers themselves don't have a ton of education. Like they might have only graduated from primary and secondary school, and they've never gotten any teacher training, especially in these rural areas. So this leads to like, the teachers aren't super motivated because they're only being paid a tiny bit. And then they're absent a lot because maybe they have to do other work or whatever. And so over 90% of Malagasy students complete primary education without their basic skills in literacy and math. So this is a really huge problem. That's a huge number. And so Teach for Madagascar is working to solve this, and they've developed some really awesome educational materials and curriculum. And the curriculum is really diverse. It's not about conservation at all, but it's about, math and reading and things like that. They have these volunteers that Teach for Madagascar recruits university educated Malagasy people to work to go to all of these rural schools, and they spend 3 to 6 months with each school. So they're living in the village and they're training the teachers and also providing all of these education materials. And it's worked really well. And they're in their fifth cohort of volunteers now. And they've worked with over 50 schools and reached over 14,000 students. So it's like huge impact. And then, so for the last two cohorts is when Lemur Conservation Network has been working with them. And so we've also contacted Lemur Conservation Foundation, one of our partners, and they have some great storybooks about lemurs that are in Malagasy and English. So we've worked together to sort of bring those storybooks about lemurs as well as our lemurs card games. And now that's part of the Teach for Madagascar curriculum for all of their schools, which is awesome because before the program it was great, but it didn't have any conservation education materials. So now all the teachers are getting the conservation education materials too. And so we also sponsor a school every cohort. So it's twice a year. Right now we have volunteers in near the Anja Reserve, which is a well-known reserve for ring-tailed lemurs in the south. And so there's in the community there that lives near the reserve. So we have the volunteers there training the teachers and bringing all the education materials and the lemurs card game and everything. So that's super exciting. And we've had other partners participate too. Last year or earlier this year, Planet Madagascar sponsored a school outside of Ankara Fonseca National Park, which is where the Kokoros shifakas live, which is my favorite species of lemur, by the way. And there's several schools in the area, and they weren't able to sponsor every school, but they said they really wish that they could because this was such a great program, and they feel like they really need to be able to sponsor all of the schools in that around the park to have such a big impact. And so this year, this next cohort, right now, we're fundraising at the Lemur Conservation Network to sponsor one or two more schools outside of Ankara Fonseca, so we can sort of amplify that impact there and make sure that all of those students are supported and not just the one school. So it's been really exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and it's something that, like, I think it's this kind of this universal. There's obviously the challenges are unique and different, and the organization's motives are for very much that context. But what I think is really interesting, right, is this certainly in context in where I grew up in the UK, and I imagine very similar maybe in the US. And this conservation education isn't built necessarily into the curriculum, right? We maybe read a book that has an animal as the character or plant has plants in it, but the games are maybe it's never really built in that kind of core way that it's kind of. So it's really interesting, not just that they're able to provide this essential kind of service and education, like service to so many communities, but also as a core pillar of that, there's also kind of this these maybe not always it's maybe not always at the forefront, like this is a lesson about reading or this is a lesson about something completely different, but if the kind of respect and love and value of nature is put throughout that's so powerful and interesting. So it's really an amazing model, I think, of how to do education that could be transferred to that any context should look at to go, actually, that's the way it should be done. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's when I was in Madagascar on my last visit, I was talking to one of our conservation partners, and the woman was telling me that it's actually mandated now for schools to have curriculum about conservation and biodiversity in Madagascar, but the teachers don't have any information. Like they don't have any materials to use. And so it's like, it's not fair that they're being told they have to teach about biodiversity, but they don't even know anything about it themselves. Yeah. So, and they don't have any materials to teach it. So it's kind of, we're doing a small part, there's tons of schools in Madagascar, but, if we can reach, 10, 15 schools a year through Teach for Madagascar and grow that, then, it's making an impact.
That's yeah. It's amazing. It really is, and like I think it also like you're doing an excellent job of providing little links to other projects that I want to kind of bring up and mention because there is this kind of like obviously like you help support these organizations and you can kind of help and something that I thought was quite interesting that you mentioned in kind of our communications was that there's a new membership program which kind of sounds like people can donate almost directly to Malagasy people through your set. Like how does that all work? So what's that, could you tell me, because like there's so many
Yeah.
things probably people are listening and going, oh, I would love to support that. How, like, so this is a perfect opportunity, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Ever since LCN was founded, part of the vision was like bringing the opportunity to help to everybody, that is not just about the big conservation organizations, that everybody can help, whether you're a person who just watched a documentary about falcons and you think they're cool, or whether you're you know university professor or whatever. And so it's kind of been a long time coming that we started this new membership program this year, and it helps us direct more donations to Malagasy NGOs, and we also use the funds from the supporting membership program to have small grants for Malagasy professionals, and it also supports our outreach and education work with Teach for Madagascar. And so it's basically, we this year we launched a couple of new membership types, and one is for Malagasy students and professionals, and that's free for them, and it's more of like a career building and networking opportunity for them. And they help with our science communications for in Malagasy, so that sort of helps them learn more about lemurs and get some experience. And those are also paid opportunities, so that's good as well. And then also, in addition to the Malagasy students and professional membership, we have these supporting memberships. So these are paid memberships, an annual membership for individuals, zoos, and businesses. So it's really the idea that anybody can get involved, and bringing lemur fans and zoos and businesses, anybody who wants to support lemur conservation. And we pool all the resources from those membership fund fees, so that if you only have $100 a year, you might feel like, well, I'm not going to be able to make a big impact. But if we get a bunch of members all pooling their resources, then we can direct those funds to these specific projects that are Malagasy led. So, for example, in last December, we had our first vote. So what we do is all the supporting members will be emailed and say, these are the projects we're thinking of supporting with this, and we have this much money. So how should we allocate the funds? Like, what do you think? So last December was our first vote, and we had $2,500, and we supported 2 Malagasy organizations, and we were able to get the NGO Conservation Allies to match the funds, so we had twice the impact. And one of the orgs we supported with the largest percentage of the funds was the Madagascar Wildlife Conservation, or MWC, and they're really the only organization that's dedicated to protecting the Lake Alouatra gentle lemur. So that's the only lemur or the only primate actually that lives in reed beds above water, and they're critically endangered, and they're really cool. And so we had been talking to this organization for a while, and we knew they were really struggling. So we wanted to direct some of our pooled funds to them. So that was really great, and also awesome that we can get the donation matched too. So that was always super cool. And then our second vote this past year was just recently in August, I believe. So we were able to award 2 $1,500 small grants to our Malagasy members. So the Malagasy conservation professionals and students, that first cohort of those members that we brought on, we offered these small grants. And so we had 2 winners, and one is actually holding a World Lemur Day event at a school in Tomasina in eastern Madagascar. And so she's going to have an environmental contest during that event, and the winners will be taken on a field trip to a protected area forest a couple of hours north of there. So it's super exciting that like these supporting memberships, people can, you're supporting something as cool as that, as like bringing a student on a field trip to the forest who's never seen lemurs before, never been in the forest. A lot of students in Madagascar never have a chance to see lemurs in the wild, which you would think is crazy, right? Like that you live in Madagascar and you don't even have the opportunity to go see the amazing animals that are there. So this type of project, I think, is super cool to support because, that type of thing is also hard to get a small grant for. Usually it's, grants are often for field work or something that's affiliated with like a PhD or whatever. And so we tried to select people who are doing something that's maybe a little harder to fund in other ways. So it's super cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really amazing. And I think that's the thing, right? Is that like there's always this like I'm currently doing my interviews for my PhD, and something that emerges, I think, in all the discussions about what are challenges to creating impact in conservation is this idea is funding, and where does it come from, who does it go to, and what's nice almost is having you as this kind of distributor of funds is that you can, because you work with and oversee so many organizations and have collaborations with all of these things, you can have a much better idea of where the money is needed than this kind of third party kind of removed pot of money maybe that comes from a university or a funding body that just kind of has no connection necessarily to place or expertise necessarily, maybe a rough expertise but not a specific one like you guys have. That's amazing. And I think both. Yeah, well, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I mean, I guess also with Lemur Conservation Network, we're able to really keep our overhead costs low. Like most of us are volunteers, so including myself. So like, being able, if you donate to a large organization, a lot of that fund is going to go to paying people that work there, which is, worthwhile that, they do awesome work. But, when you're donating to Lemur Conservation Network, especially as a supporting member, you know exactly where this is going, where the funds are going. And you have a say in it too, that, people can vote and say, oh, I really like, for the small grants, we narrowed it down to 3 as like finalists. And then we had the supporting members vote on which ones to support, which projects to support. So you get, a little more insider knowledge of like where it's going. And so I think it's exciting.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, because I think there's a disconnect almost. Sometimes you drop a pound or a couple dollars or whatever currency you use into a bucket, and once that's gone, you have no idea where it goes. But to be able to know actually it went to this specific person or this specific project or this to support this specific lemur. Which what I was gonna say was I don't know what the other options were, so I don't want to be biased. But the story you told about the gentle lemur, I was kind of like, yep, that would have got my vote. That would have got my vote. Yeah, sounds amazing. And so
with
unique.
the small grants, like we also have part of the requirement of the grant is that they write a blog post for our website and some social media posts about their project. So it's kind of cool because it just feeds into, you know, promoting the grant program, but also promoting their work and letting people in, on the inside. If you're checking out our Instagram or whatever, you can hear about, this forest visit or whatever. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It is very, very cool. It is very, very cool. And I would, listeners, if you're out there, because I think sometimes we often kind of throw a donation link or something into the description of an episode, but this time, if you want to be more involved than just donating into a big pot that you never know where it goes, this is the one. This is the one to go to. Go and have a look in the description. I'll put links to the website down there so people can go now while we're having the next part of our discussion, and go and have a look and see what's going on. Because I think that's it's a fantastic way of doing it, because for so many reasons that just kind of especially going into the hands of local kind of organization, it just on so many levels it makes me very, very happy. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, and a lot of the local organizations have a hard time collecting donations online because they need to have, you can't actually do that in Madagascar unless you have an international partner. Like you can't just have an online donation link like the way the banks are set up. And people, are hesitant to like wire money, or your bank has a bunch of fees to wire. So like doing it this way, we sort of coordinate everything, and you're not like feeling all sketchy by like wiring like $500 to some organization or whatever.
Yep. That sounds a lot more, a lot better and a lot more secure and also a lot, and it helps, yeah, organizations you never could otherwise reach. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing.
that's
Um
the goal.
and I guess speaking of organizations that people like might not know enough about or not be normally have been able to reach, I think that's a good transition into let's talk about some of the collaborating organizations and some of the amazing work that's been going on, because I think we've talked about kind of the games, the education, the kind of membership program, um, but there's also a lot of kind of like really interesting kind of like conservation work going on with some of your partners. And I think like the first one that I have written down to chat about is some reforestation work that's going on in Eastern
Yes.
Madagascar. I wonder, like, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's so many organizations doing amazing work in Madagascar, and like a few of these projects that I've heard about this year like have me pretty excited and hopeful. So the first one, yeah, like there's a new reforestation project in Eastern Madagascar. So Eastern Madagascar is a rainforest, and it's where the largest living lemur species, the Indri, lives. And it's also very highly visited by tourists because it's only 4 to 6 hours, depending on traffic and road conditions, from Antananarivo, the capital. And so this is really highly visited area. But there's these two forests, the Andasibi Mantadia National Park and the Analmozotra Special Reserve, and they're both protected areas, but they're not connected. And so this project is reforesting 150 hectare forest corridor that'll reconnect those two parks and allow the lemur species and all the other wildlife to travel between for more connectedness. And so it's kind of awesome. And so it's a huge partnership between a bunch of different organizations. There's the Abby Ross Foundation for Applied Conservation, and the Mad Dog Initiative. Association Mitsinju is a Malagasy organization that manages the Analmozotra Special Reserve. And there's other organizations and the University of Antananarivo. So this is a big collaborative project, which I always love to see because that it's just feels like it makes so much sense. We all need to work together.
Yeah.
And there's 12 lemur species in this area, so it's really a hugely important rainforest area. And so far this year, they've replanted 30 of the 150 hectares that they're planting, and they've used over 36,000 seedlings. They're using all native tree species. And something that I was talking to Abby Ross about this week, and she said they're using some kind of cool scientific methods here. So to increase the survival rate of the seedlings, they're introducing a fungi. How do you say
Fung, fungi,
that? Like
one of
mushroom
the two.
fungus
Mushrooms. Yeah.
to the reforestation plots. And so actually having this has proved it reduces the mortality rates of the seedlings by a lot. So it's like really proven to increase their productivity. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also a PhD student that's working with them, and he is developing a bioacoustic monitoring system that, like, once the corridor is replanted, it will track the return of wildlife to the corridor. And so see how the trees are growing, see what the animals are doing, and you'd be able to track that through using bioacoustics. So I think that's kind of cool. And I'm curious to see how that progresses. So keep your eye on that spot.
Yeah, that could be next year or a couple of years down the line. World Lemur Day podcast
Yeah.
episode. There's probably something in
Yeah.
that because I don't think we've talked about bioacoustics at all on the podcast before. So that's something that sounds incredible, and it sounds like as you said, it's nice to hear about these kind of major projects that have collaboration, have these kind of things, but also in these collaborations are able to spawn so many different like kind of interesting stories out of them, because if one organization with one focus was to do this project, it would maybe become focused on one element, and then you wouldn't have the bioacoustics being considered, you wouldn't have the interesting kind of plant work with the fungi and things going on. Like, that's so interesting that like how how this is all working together. And yeah, hopefully, yes. And an injury is
Yeah.
always a big win for me. So like that is, yeah, that's so fantastic. Like, yeah,
Right. And I
really, really
think you need
interesting.
these collaborations too, because
Yeah.
you need buy-in from so many different people, and they're also using local people for the job. So like to monitor the area and do the seedlings and all of that stuff. So hopefully that will, you know, bring pride and ownership to the local community because this is their job and they helped raise these trees. So hopefully this will make it a really long-lasting project.
Yeah, that's so exciting, and I can't wait to see. I cannot wait to see how that turns out. Because yeah, and hopefully just all good things. And when these two kind of areas are connected, it will kind of span. It will do more than kind of just provide more kind of forest. It will provide so much more life in in so many other ways. And yeah, maybe
Yeah,
the bioacoustics will be able to show that. Like
that would be
yeah,
cool.
especially because I think most people would think maybe of when they're thinking of these kind of spaces, they will think of maybe bird song or these things. But lemurs can make some pretty fantastic noises, so that's going to be a interesting, bizarre kind of study. That will be really, really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious to see how it turns out.
yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. Well, from from kind of acoustics to visuals, I suppose, and I
Yeah.
think something else that we wanted to talk about was a new camera trapping kind of project that's going on
Yeah.
in the northeast, I believe. So yeah, what kind of
Yeah.
work's going
So
on there?
in the northeast of Madagascar is another rainforest area. And that's where Marajegi and Anjanaharibe Sud Vegetable Reserve are, which is called ASSR for ease of pronunciation. Um, and so that's where the silky sifakas live, which are critically endangered species of sifaka. They're all white and they often have like pink faces. And so they're super cool animals, and it's a really, really awesome area. There's big mountains there, and it's all rainforest. So silky sifakas it's estimated there's between 200 and 2,000 individuals left. So it's really important to track what's happening with silky sifakas and really get enough data to understand, where they're living and how many are there. But there's not currently enough data about this in ASSR, so to know like how large or small the population is. And so the Lemur Conservation Foundation, Dr. Eric Patel, had done a camera trap project in 2019 in ASSR, but since then there's been a lot more mining and logging, and there's like a big road that goes through the park, and a lot of people are traveling from the northwest of Madagascar to the northeast. So it's like people are walking through a lot. So they really needed to know like what's happening in this area and how it's impacting the wildlife populations. So this project is led by a researcher, Patrick Ross, in collaboration with Eric Patel from LCF and also a bunch of other organizations, including Wildlife Madagascar, who has been on your podcast. And so they set up 74 camera traps at 37 stations in ASSR, and it included camera traps on the ground, and in the forest canopy. So this is actually the first time that they've done camera traps in the canopy in this forest. So they're really curious to learn like what they find out. There hasn't been any data about it before. So the canopy traps are targeted towards the silky sifakas and their favorite trees that they suspect that they will be in. And so there's also, a bunch of other lemur species that live in this park. And Patrick was telling me that he's curious to see if they find a fork-marked lemur species, which is nocturnal, because the park is very close to the northernmost boundary of their known range, but they're not sure if the species lives there or not. So they're kind of curious to see what they find. And they're also going to be looking at the carnivores in the forest and the birds. So I think they're looking to understand everything that's there and hoping to spot some things that might be surprising or lead to targeting conservation efforts. So Patrick was telling me this week that they got the data from all the camera traps for December through June, and he's processing the first batches, which is about 200,000 photos.
Ooh.
So that's a
Ooh.
huge effort.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's just starting the data processing now, but we'll find out. He said they got lots of lemurs, so fingers crossed that we get some awesome data about the silky sifakas and how many are there, and can really understand more about how they use the canopy and can target conservation for that. And also, I'm sure there's got to be some cool photos of the carnivores too, which I know Patrick is super interested in.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because I think something that I was thinking as you were talking there was this thing of like, well, like putting obviously you can't have a researcher sat in a tree for hours and hours and hours trying to see what comes by. Like it's just not feasible. But at the same time, putting a camera trap in a tree high up in the canopy, there's probably challenges to do with if they sense movement. There is a lot of movement in a canopy, whether that be just leaves in the breeze or whether that be
Yeah,
birds or kind of
true.
any of these kind of things that are moving around up there. So I 200,000 is still more than I probably would have guessed, but there's so many, that's a lot of work, but I'm sure there'll be some amazing pictures and images in there that hopefully reveal
Yeah,
a lot of really valuable data, more than, and probably things that were not even expected, right? There might be things in there that, oh, we'd hoped to see like stuff about the shifakas and kind of the carnivores, but there might be stuff in there that's useful to all kinds of other interests, whether
yeah.
that be birds or others. All these sorts of people will
Well, and
benefit from this kind of
especially
research.
this park, because it's
Yeah.
so it's traveled through a lot. Like I was there a few years ago, and they have a camp there. But to get to the camp, you're walking down this road that you see people, bringing zebus, the cattle, and carrying things from one end of the country to another. And apparently the northern that area, the northeastern area where ASSR and Merjegiar is also the vanilla region. So there's higher prices for things in that area. So people are like, well, I'm going to go and sell my zebu in the north in that area because it might take me a few days walk to get there, but I'll be able to sell it for way more than if I sold it where I live. So a lot of people are walking through this area. So I think understanding, they might get camera trap photos on the ground of people walking by too. So being able to quantify, what that traffic is, and that would be really interesting and helpful too.
Yeah, that's amazing actually, and that's an element that like I guess sometimes forget. Like we often put camera traps with the intention of I'm gonna find an animal rather than actually there's a lot of valuable data in that. Yeah, that's I think what we're doing here is making me realize I need to do a whole other series of podcasts all about lemurs, because I'm like each of these little highlights. I'm like I could do another hour talking about this with someone, because it's so
Yeah.
amazing, so amazing. And I guess in your last kind of answer there, you mentioned somebody who's been on the podcast before, which is Wildlife Madagascar. And yeah, I think to end, it would be nice I think they were last year's Lemur Day kind of episode. It would be nice to give a little update on them specifically,
Yes.
because I think they've had a very, very exciting year since we spoke. So do you want to tell the listeners a little
Yeah.
bit about what they've been up to?
So another one of the projects they're working on is super exciting. When I heard about it, I was like, wow, like really intrigued. Um, so it's the Singi de Namaraka National Park in the west. So the Singi is sort of like the karst forests of Madagascar. So you've got gray limestone pinnacles that are, super tall and pointy, and the lemurs and other animals like jump between them. And then there's also like caves and stuff like that on the ground. And there's 3 Singi parks, the Singi de Bemaraha, which is also in the west, and the Ankarana, which is in the north, and then Singi de Namaraka. And I had never before this year ever heard of anybody going to Singi de Namaraka. Like it's listed on the map and you're like, oh, that's a cool park. Like, how do I get there? And like nobody that I knew had ever been there. And I've talked to a lot of people who have traveled to Madagascar. Um, so then I heard that there was going to be a new eco lodge there, and it's by a company called Madagascar Classic Collection, and they have a like luxury tented camp in the south. And I had actually met Ed from from Madagascar Classic Collection when I was there last summer at the Mashwala Forest Lodge. We just happened to be there at the same time. So once I heard about this happening, I was super intrigued, and know that he's very experienced and it would be a great place to visit. And then I heard that they're actually partnering with Wildlife Madagascar, who you had spoken to as a conservation NGO. And so it's really an amazing partnership, this collaboration angle again, that like they are actually using some of the funds from every visitor to the new camp at Singidinamaraka to fund and build a scientific field station at the property. And they're going to be doing a whole bunch of conservation work. And so it's a partnership, a really close partnership. And it's really exciting because this area is so underexplored. And I think there's maybe 11 or 12 lemur species that live there, including the Deccan shafaka, which is sort of a mostly all white, but it has like a black face. It's sort of similar to the Verreaux's shafaka and the Cockerel's shafaka in look, but it's slightly different. And there's also gray bamboo lemurs, red-brown lemurs, and just so many lemur species. And this whole area has just not been explored really at all. So it's super exciting to have a scientific field station and then to be able to go as a tourist too. I'm like, when can I go?
Yep.
I want to go check it out.
And I always forget until you did that list, that little tiny list, and that's only a fragment of a fragment of a fragment of different lemurs. But I always forget just how vastly diverse these amazing animals are. And it's always, I think when the eye gets mentioned, I'm always like, yeah, they are a bizarrely brilliant group of animals, aren't they? But no, that sounds like an amazing, amazing project and something that opens so many gateways to kind of engagement and research and education, and it loops really nicely into so many of these themes that we've talked about throughout, right? Of bringing in education aspects and research aspects, and there's so many kind of ways to do this, and it's nice to hear that they're partnering with kind of Wildlife Madagascar, so it's not kind of like a company doing tourism that's kind of ecotourism. It's a company partnering with a conservation organization with good knowledge and good background to do good conservation work. Is like, that's so exciting. Like, it's going to be. I keep making, every time I do one of these episodes, I'm like, I need to find an excuse to go, and I think maybe
There's
eventually this could be
plenty of reasons to go.
Yeah. Maybe it's less an excuse, more funds. I need to find somebody.
Yeah.
I need to
Get
start
like
saving.
a sponsorship or something.
I'll need to. I'll try and I'll apply for a research grant from my university, even though my research has nothing to do with Madagascar at all. I'll be like, oh no, I need to go there. Why? Well, because I do.
Yeah.
It's essential. No, that sounds amazing. That sounds absolutely amazing. And yeah, I think a really lovely way to kind of begin to kind of wrap up the episode with that kind of nice throwback to last year. And before I kind of let you go, I know there's a couple questions I like to ask everybody, and I think for World Lemur Day I have lemurified the questions, as I do for any themed event. I change them a little bit. So normally I ask every guest to give me their favorite underappreciated species, plant, animal, whatever it is. But of course I'm gonna have to put some limits on that for World Lemur Day. So it must be, what is your favorite underappreciated species of lemur?
Yes. I mean, there's so many choices. I love all lemurs, obviously. But I think my favorite right now, underappreciated, is the woolly lemurs. The scientific name is Avahi. My last trip to Madagascar was actually the first time I saw them in the wild, which is kind of crazy, because I've been there 4 times. So they're nocturnal, and they have really woolly, thick fur, hence the name woolly lemur. But they have this like really adorable, like teddy bear like face, like where like around the face is like this round part with like short fur, and then the fur kind of starts poofing out like after the circle. So It's just like, they're so adorable. When I first saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this species of lemur I somehow didn't know about? And I've finally seen them in the wild now, so that's exciting.
I am now searching. Let's have a look. Because I am. I fully, yes, I understand. Because they do look like little teddy bears that have come alive. And
Yeah.
It's almost reminiscent of, I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but it is almost Ewok-y kind of. Yeah,
you're right.
like, yeah. with
That hadn't
oh the
occurred to me, but yeah, totally.
yeah oh they are gorgeous things. They are, yeah, I fully understand that one. Yeah, there's I mean I never need justification to love any of the species that anybody mentions, but I think it has to be I think it has to be that's a solid choice. Um, yes, I guess then moving on slightly. Of course, like World Lemur Day, I always ask how can people be involved, but I think specifically today of all days on World Lemur Day, how would you recommend people get involved in the celebrations, the World Lemur Festival? What can
Yeah.
people be doing? Yeah, what can people be up to do?
Well, definitely for World Lemur Day and the World Lemur Festival, we always have a huge blast on social media, sharing lots of um, photos and tidbits about lemurs. And there's always a bunch of organizations will often do like video updates and stuff like that. And also, we have an event calendar on our website, so that will show if there's a zoo or other organization near you that's having an event. So there might be something at your local zoo. There are zoos on several continents that are holding World Lemur Day events, so there might be something near you. I also feel like, I really think that there's a place for everyone in conservation to get involved. And we need lots more people to be involved, as I'm sure you hear all the time in your podcast. I think people have this vision that like you have to be a PhD scientist to be involved in conservation. And I feel like I'm living proof that you do not have to be a PhD scientist. When I first started, I didn't have a lot of background in science, and now I have a master's, but we really need lots of people from like communications, accountants, marketing professionals, lawyers, like pretty any skill that you can think of in the business world. We need it in conservation. So don't think that you have to be a scientist. We have a lot of scientists already, more are great, but what we really need, I think, are some of these other skills. And I often, when I first started Lemur Conservation Network, I asked myself, like, I saw this need to develop a platform, a network for all these organizations. And I asked myself, like, if not me, who? And like, even if someone else were to do this idea, when? Is it going to be soon enough? 31% of lemurs species are critically endangered. We don't have a whole ton of extra time to like be waiting around for someone else to take a step. So I think if you're listening and you're interested in lemur conservation, like it can be you who can do something. And I also always am happy and delighted to get emails from folks who are like, I want to be involved. I don't really know how or with who, but like, and I'll brainstorm with people like, okay, well, what do you like to do? Is there anything you're want to try out? Or what do you think is fun? And then I can either connect them with opportunities at the Lemur Conservation Network, or if I know of a partner organization who has a need for something like that, what they're describing, and we can figure out how you can help. So you don't have to necessarily have the answer. Just sort of think about what you're good at, can get in touch with me and we can have a chat and figure out how you can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is brilliant, and I think it's just it goes. Just to kind of echo some of the things you've said. Like, yes, I have no degree in biology. I have no degree in anything to do with kind of this classic conservation-y skills. My undergrad degree was in politics, and then I did. I happened to convert to a master's in conservation, but that was kind of way after the fact, and that's when I started this. Was not because I had all these skills that made me be like, oh, I need to share these skills. It's because I like talking to people, and then there's people out there who I know who are artists, or there's actors, or people who are interested in finance, or people who are interested. It doesn't matter what your background is. Like, anybody can and should and would be welcomed with open arms to be involved. So I think that's a really powerful message. And yes, and I'll put, obviously, like, my final question is usually kind of, where can people keep up to date with your work? You've mentioned it a little bit there, but obviously I'll put links to the websites where people can get email addresses and social media platforms and all that sort of stuff from. But is there anything else you wanted to highlight as things where people can go to keep up to date with various things
so
that
we
you're
have
doing?
our website, which is lemurconservationnetwork.org, and we have an email newsletter at the bottom of every page on the site. You can sign up, and then we send out once a month or so an email up with updates about what we're working on or how you can get involved. And there's also just tons of resources on our site. That was something that was important for us to do to like provide. We have lots of learning materials about lemurs and about their conservation. And you can, we have actually for World Lemur Day, we have a new very lengthy PDF activity guide that has tons of coloring sheets. It has like mask templates. It has some games in there. And so that's super fun if you're, looking for activities with your kids or whatever to engage them with lemur conservation. And and we have lots of resources on our site. And we have a tool on our site. If you browse all of the lemur conservation members, you can filter by the type of lemur and where they work and the type of conservation work. So it's helpful if you are like a student and you're wanting to understand what type of conservation work is happening or get in touch with, a certain organization that might focus on the lemur that you really want to work with, or whether you're, looking to donate and you want to be like, okay, I want to direct my funds to somebody who works with ring-tailed lemurs, for example, then you can see all the organizations that work with that. So that's really, our website is really there to be a resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. And yeah, as I've said many times now, that will be linked below. Go and check it out. I think there's so much good stuff on there that we have mentioned and stuff that we haven't even touched on at all. So go and have a look and see and learn, because the world of lemurs is endless and there is so much out there to learn and to be discovered, because I think as we are learning every time we do one of these, there is more and more to be known about these amazing animals. And it's just, they are a constant source of fascination for me.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. And I guess also, of course, while you're down there kind of looking at all of those things, the shameless plug, have a look at our social media platforms as well. We're at Pangolin Podcast on everything. You can follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast wherever you are, especially if you love lemurs, because they, I think, at this point are the most recurring character we have ever had on the podcast. And I am so grateful for it. And with all of that said, I guess the final thing to mention is just to say a huge thank you to you, Lynne, not just for today's episode, but for all of the support that you've provided the show over the years. I think you've been given shout outs in a number of episodes maybe in the past, but we've never had you here to thank formally in person. So thank you so much for all of the work that you've done for lemurs, for Pangolin, the conservation podcast, for all of these organizations. Thank you so much for everything, and happy World Lemur Day.
Thank you. And thank you also. We are so grateful to have you have worked with us for so many different episodes, and it's really helpful to get lemur conservation work out there to people all around the world. And it's like such a huge effort you've put together, and it's really powerful.
No, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been an absolute honor. I keep doing these episodes recently. I had one recently with one of the first ever guests I had on the podcast, and it's nice, after a few years, to look back and be like, oh, this is actually doing things. This is nice to know that.
Yes, for sure.
It's really, really nice. So thank you so much, and yes, thank you. And before I get all nostalgic and I'll start kind of welling up, I should wrap up and say, of course, a huge also thank you to the listeners for tuning in. If you have been intrigued by anything we've said, as I said, we've said Wildlife Madagascar was on the show last year, so scroll back down the podcast feed, find that episode, find episodes. I think we have name dropped a number of previous guests throughout the episodes, so pretty much any name you've heard at this point, I think has been on the show. So go back, have a look, and see if you can find them. And so go and have a look. And the last thing to say, of course, is a huge thank you and happy World Lemur Day. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.